This video is going to be a little rougher around the edges than my usual thing because I really need to stay focused on this. And this is like a very precious instrument for me. This is my baby, or one of my babies. Little short backstory. I bought this in 2018 at the beginning of a very important journey in my life. So I moved to a place that I'd never been to before. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know the neighborhood, obviously, because I'd never been there before. But the purpose was to separate myself from everything that I knew so that I could grow as a person and maybe leave the old me behind and create a much better me that I could be proud of, because I wasn't exactly not toxic for a large portion of my life as a result of the things that I'd been through, having no support system. And I said, I can't depend on people to make me better anymore. I need to take that up for myself and take care of myself. And so I did that. And about 2 months into moving to this new place, I felt more settled in. I had made some friends, and I really felt like I built my own new life for the first time ever, not depending on other people introducing me to their friends anymore. I made my own. So I decided to go to the local music store again, and so they had this for $100. Came from a college student, I believe, and it's been on this journey with me ever since. I wrote just a reset on it. I've worked on quite a few demos on this thing. I've taken it with me to the barn that I've mentioned before, which is like a getaway and away from society, which is something you need sometimes, I think. And so what has to be done to it today is a neck reset, which is just spooky to me just because it's a special guitar. When I first got this, it was pretty obvious that somebody had done some sort of a touch-up or repair. It's not there anymore, but there was a white line with a lot of squeeze out around the outside of this heel all the way around, and it's not there anymore, which means I think someone just pumped glue into the edges and hoped it would hold the neck on. I don't think this thing ever actually had a neck reset as much as I thought that it did. And the bridge may have been lifting at some point and someone just squeezed glue into the gap and didn't even clean the squeeze out. I mean, it's pretty nasty. And I should probably preface by saying that while I've never done a neck reset before, I've been researching it for years, taking notes of the steps in the order that you're supposed to do them to remove them, best practices. You know, I've been researching how to do it for years, and while I never put it into practice, I know the steps, I know what not to do, I know what to do, and I know to take it slow and be gentle, because acoustic instruments are very sensitive, fragile things.
So, unaware of what type of glue was used to put this guitar together, I heated up the fretboard extension using some putty knives to very carefully separate it from the soundboard.
So it's just one of those things where, without knowing completely, there's only so much of a judgment call I can make. Also, this one's kind of a bother initially, because the fretboard actually overhangs the sound hole, which I'm not used to seeing on acoustic guitars. Usually they're shorter than, or they curve with it. So there's actually a portion of this extension that I can't just easily get underneath, so I actually have to travel across the soundboard and the sound hole to get under the extension, which is a little spooky.
Ignore the screws in the soundboard. I'll address that later.
I'm trying really hard not to cause issues, you know? Oh yeah, okay.
The cracks you're hearing is the glue releasing, not the wood, so don't worry about it.
We're getting there. It's very close. Okay, this is about the point where I think I'm going to take the heat off the neck, because I think the fretboard extension is basically completely removed now. That wasn't nearly as stressful and scary as I thought it was going to be, but I guess that's because I was prepared. Okay, so this is very unideal, but I have to remove this fret with a 1/4 inch chisel, which I've done many, many times before on other instruments. It's just a much slower, much more risky process, but I've done it. What I'm doing here is I'm just kind of scoring the fretboard on either side of the fret before heating it up, so that when I'm pulling the fret out, there's less of a chance of, if there is split out, it traveling across the board. I don't want to score too deeply because I don't want to put a weak point in the wood. So I'm just kind of scoring and cutting the top layer of fibers.
Just using a bit of heat in case these frets were glued in. There's a chance they weren't, but if they were, I gotta soften it.
So it's probably a good start. So all I'm doing is going under the edge, doing a bit of a lifting motion. The sound you're hearing is my chisel slipping out. This end of the fret is now up.
Some people like to run a bead of solder across the fret. I suppose it helps spread the heat, but I don't really think it's necessary here.
This is a very ugly way of doing this, but fret pullers are like $60. I can't pull that kind of money out of my arse. Okay, it's cooling down. But there we go. I'm going to peel the tape toward the fret slot. That way the risk of me tearing out fibers that might be stuck to the tape is a hell of a lot lower. But I'm also going to hold it flat to the body as I do it. Okay, looking at it, what I thought was a split, I don't think is actually a split. No, it's just the grain of the wood. It's good.
Here I'm just priming the fret slot to accept a 2mm drill bit. I'm running it in reverse first so that I can create something of a pilot hole and reduce the risk of tear out. And then I'm going to be drilling a hole pretty deep at somewhat of an angle to go through the whole dovetail because I only have one heat stick. And so I want to try and cover as much of the dovetail as possible. This will be used to heat the glue up so it's soft and I can actually push the neck out using my very quickly thrown together neck removal jig.
It's very important that I don't put any pressure down, which I'm not doing. I'm actually trying to hold the drill up. Okay, there we go. Heat is on. I should be able to feel the heel warm up at some point, and when I start feeling it warm up, I will start adding a little bit of tension. Now, assuming this is a dovetail and not a mortise and tenon, I should only need to lift it a little bit for it to start coming out. Now, if it's a mortise and tenon, this is going to be a way more difficult job, and I'm going to need to upgrade to a much longer screw to get it to come out. But for now, it's fine. The neck's actually really loose in the pocket already.
In hindsight, this isn't that surprising considering how much the heel had separated from the body and how little glue was actually in the joint later on. So I guess the universe was going easy on me considering how important this guitar is to me.
Actually, I am seeing that There's a slight bit of lift already. It does really feel like it just wants to come out. I upped the heat a little bit, added a little bit of water into my drilled hole, and I've just been slowly working it, paying attention to how much movement is happening on either side. And now it's just an issue of trying to get the neck to move enough that I can start to tip it out. So it's time for me to start applying more pressure to the screw. Just a bit. Oh!
That's the sound I was waiting for, but as a person who suffers with anxiety, in the moment, I was immediately terrified,
Sound, I think.
but then was able to convince myself everything was fine.
Oh my god, and it didn't blow through the soundboard.
Considering I've never done a neck reset before, I was worried that truss rod was going to blow through the top and the brace, but thankfully it didn't. We're good.
Oh my god, I'm so glad I started filming again. I've been working on it for like 15 minutes off camera because I was like, I don't think this is going to get me anywhere, but holy shit, it did. Oh man, that was a victory pop. Next up is cleaning off the old glue. And I was doing a little bit of a test with a chisel to see how difficult this glue is going to be to kind of clean up. And I noticed that it feels like this glue is like on the surface of the wood, but didn't really soak into it. It's kind of just popping off super easy, which is really giving me this epoxy vibe. And I was already suspecting the epoxy because of the smell. It feels really wrong to be doing this to my guitar, but it has to be done. And I suppose this could be considered yet another journey me and my guitar are going on together, which is par for the course, I suppose. I mean, we've been through a lot together as it is. It was here to help me heal, and now I am here to return the favor, I guess. So now there's just some like thin layers of it left, and I think a bit of sandpaper will get rid of that. So I can probably do a bit of a dry test fit, see how this all goes together. That seems pretty good. And I think even though I haven't really corrected the angle, because I really don't think I need to, I think it just separated. The angle was fine. So I think I've done a pretty freaking good job for my first time doing this. A lot of work to do still, but pretty good. Okay, so we're at the part of the project where I believe I'm about to glue it up now. The whole intention of this project wasn't to adjust the neck angle, wasn't to change anything about the instrument. It was just the fact that the neck had broken its glue joint and started lifting. Mostly, it seems, as a result of the lack of actual glue in the joint. There was a little bit of flex in the fretboard extension as a result of it lifting, but it's not that much. I can put it down by hand with little to no force, so it'll be perfectly fine once it's glued up. I'm going to expose a little bit more wood under here so that there's more wood-to-wood contact with the Titebond. But overall, everything's pretty good to go. I'm going to be putting a clamp above the 14th fret, right above and below the neck block, because there is the most support there for this, and that's going to be to hold the dovetail in place just to make sure nothing shifts. And then I'm going to have another clamp over here that's going to bring the fretboard extension down to the body, and I'm going to leave it clamped up like that for 24 hours.
So with all the surfaces cleaned and ready for glue, I applied glue, put the guitar back together, and applied the clamps and left it for 24 hours. There was a shift, but we'll talk about that in a moment.
Okay, so it has been 5 to 6 days since that last clip where I said I was going to leave the guitar clamped up for 24 hours before removing them, which I did. And everything, to my surprise, was pretty good afterward. And there was like one singular issue with the glue up, but it actually, as you can see, or hear, didn't really cause any problems. So the heel isn't completely flush to the body like I was really hoping it would be. It was when I first glued it up, but it shifted during the glue, but it's only lifted about, fraction of a millimeter. It's not a whole millimeter. It's not half a millimeter. It's probably a little bit above half. It's not that bad. It's actually what it was when I first got it. I guess I understand why they filled it with something. But other than the heel being lifted from the body a little bit, the angle's really nice. I projected it over to the bridge and it seemed perfect to me. The only real issue that I had to deal with that was causing a problem was because the neck was lifting for Lord knows how long before I noticed it needed a neck reset. The board, the fingerboard, right underneath the 14th fret had kind of formed a bit of a hump. So I had to do a spot level on that fret. And I don't really have the proper tools to do really good fret work, but I do what I can with the tools that I have. And I gotta say, out of all the fret work that I've done, that is the nicest fret that I've done. And honestly, the best polish I've been able to get. I did kind of polish all the frets. They were pretty oxidized and looking a bit non-shiny. It's not really important that they're shiny, but I figured I'd give my baby a little bit of a touch-up in all fronts. I did make a new saddle, actually, out of bone, which was sourced from the same place that I was making a saddle for the clock guitar in my previous video. I'm still working on that, but this kind of took priority, given that it's a very sentimental instrument for me. The saddle's not perfect. It's not sharp, but it's pretty intonated. I've never intonated a acoustic saddle before, nor have I really made anything out of bone outside of the clock guitar saddle, which isn't really finished. So it's kind of an all-arounder first time for everything for this one. So I'm fairly impressed with myself for having completed it this well for my first time on a lot of fronts. And so one thing that I didn't do very well was trying to patch the holes where those screws were. It needs a little top coat of lacquer and then some polish, and the color is never going to change, but I can at least bring it back to more of a gloss, and it won't be such an eyesore of like discoloration and also, very obvious non-shiny thing. I've never done that kind of work before, but it needed to be done. The reason the screws were in the top of the guitar were mainly because I was kind of in a dark place and also kind of stupid and didn't really think a lot of things through before I did it. But I got a Focusrite 2i4 or Scarlett 2i4 at the same time that I got this. And I really wanted to start writing a song, but I didn't have a microphone. I had what I think was an old telephone or an alarm or something that had a piezo, and I knew that piezo pickups were a thing. So I did some Googling on how they worked and found out, I could just put them on any surface that's vibrating and it will hear those vibrations. So my solution to not having a microphone and not having the money to go out and buy a bunch of new recording equipment, not that I knew anything about what would be good for the money, I just took this piezo, I kind of squeezed it in between two pieces of really thin foam to protect the top, and then I took an old neck plate for a Squier guitar and I mounted that piezo to the top with that neck plate. It's stupid. I would never do anything like that ever again unless I bought a real junker guitar to do stupid experiments with specifically. I actually kind of have one for that off in the corner, which is going to be turned into something. But yeah, it was me in a dark place, really wanting to get the darkness out of me by writing some songs, but I had no way of recording them other than, I guess, my phone. But that seemed like taboo for me to record music with a phone. And so I kind of like did some dumb shit. I also put a trapeze on here for a while. This is a lot more hidden than those are. But overall, they were mistakes. I was aware of them being mistakes pretty soon after doing it. But again, to me, this was just a really cheap guitar that was unimportant. And now that I've been on a journey with it for so long, despite only writing one song on it, it was a very, very important song for me to write. And now this thing is maybe not the most important guitar in my collection, but the top 5 most important guitars in my collection. And so I wanted to give it as much love as I possibly could and try and at least maintain some of the mistakes that I made with it originally. Fix the neck, patch the holes on the top just so there isn't screws there anymore. For no reason other than the fact that it looked terrible. And even though the color of these doesn't quite match the top, and they don't honestly look that great, they look a lot better than screws. And who knows, I might put a sticker over them to hide them. But at the same time, those scars are a part of its story, a part of mine. They're mistakes. They happened, and that's okay because I learned. And that's all I can really ask. So, as it stands, it's not fully complete. I still want to make a new nut for it. Still need to polish up the saddle a bit more. But overall, it's good. I sealed those plugs with super glue, so there is a finish on it, but I want to make it a little bit more glossy than it is, make it feel a little bit more intentional, I guess. So that's that. It was just a reset. Nothing more.